GH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be putting in your Commander decks, episode 17. Starting out with a really old card here and a pretty hideous one as well. The art on this card looks like it was drawn by my kid. Nevertheless, it is a pretty great card, and I'm surprised I never see it in Commander. This, again, is not an expensive card, just throwing that out there. Gaia's Touch, green and a green enchantment. You may pay 0 and put a basic forest card from your hand onto the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery and only once each turn. So essentially the wording there, even though it's kind of weird, this allows you to play an extra land on your turn, right? It's basically an exploration effect, only for basic forest though. Of course, if you're in a mono green deck, you probably don't care about that. But also if you're even in like a 2-color lands deck, I think it's worth putting in there. And you can also sacrifice to add 2 green. So it is a pretty darn good ramp option in a lot of decks. I mean, you play this turn 2, you can immediately activate it to put another forest into play. So now you got, let's say, 3 forests in play, untap the next turn, put 2 more lands into play. So now you got 5, and then you can sacrifice to add 2 green as you got 7 mana on turn 3. It seems pretty good, right? So it's a pretty great accelerator. I'm surprised it doesn't see more play. Next up, Gaia's Balance. 3 and a green sorcery is an additional cost to cast this spell. Sacrifice 5 land, search your library for a land card of each basic land type. Put those cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So it's not the greatest option in the world for mana fixing in a 5-color deck, but I think it is a pretty decent option. It's a budget one for sure. You want to budget mana fixed in your 5-color deck, this is a way to do it. You're basically just turning whatever 5 lands you have into a land of each basic land type. So it mana fixes you, also gives you those basic land types, which can be important with some of those domain abilities as well. Keep that in mind. So just throwing it out there if you're not aware this card exists. Next up is Galvanth, 3 red beast, 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may look at the top card of your library. You may cast it without paying its mana cost if it's an instant or sorcery spell. I'm kind of shocked that, again, this is another card I don't think I've ever seen in a Commander game. It seems pretty fantastic in just a generic Is-It Spellslinger deck. Just at the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top card. If it happens to be a instant or sorcery, you get to cast it for free. You don't have to, of course. It's a may, so if you see a Blasphemous Act on top of your library, you don't have to cast it, you just put it in your hand. If you see a Time Stretch on top of your library, you can go ahead and cast it for free. Just seems like pretty great value. Obviously, extra good if you're in a top deck manipulation theme, right? And in fact, even if you're not in an instant sorcery theme, but you can manipulate the top of your library quite a bit, it might be worth putting in there. Just free value. Next up, one of my favorites, and this time we have fantastic art on a card, in my opinion. I really love the art on this card, and it is just a very unique card. Cold Snap, in fact, is pretty infamous for having some very unique cards. Great set to go back and look at if you're new to the game of Magic. Black, and a black 2/2. So a 3 black mana 2/2. You can sacrifice it to destroy target non-black creature. That's it. So this is just a creature that sacrifices at instant speed to destroy a non-black creature. Pretty great. I don't love the non-black part. Of course, this is just the way black cards used to be. However, it is very rare to have a creature that just sacrifices at instant speed to destroy another creature. You'll have a hard time finding a creature that does that. I always auto-include this guy in any Ravos deck that I am making because, of course, Ravos allows you to get creatures back on your upkeep, and also it ensures you have a creature in your graveyard, right? So on the end step before my turn, I know I can get a creature back out of my graveyard, but I don't have any because someone just bajuka-bogged me. I'll sacrifice my Guards Assassin to kill whatever, and then get my Guards Assassin back on my upkeep. I can also get my Guards Assassin back with the Recover ability, the very rarely seen Recover ability, again from Cold Snap. It's only on a handful of cards. Not the greatest ability ever. Probably aren't going to use it here because, of course, you have to pay half your life rounded up. So whenever another creature dies, you may pay half your life rounded up if you do return this card from your graveyard to your hand, otherwise exile it. And that's not particularly great. You can use it. Likely you won't. And of course, you'll have to exile it from your graveyard if you don't. That's why with that Ravos situation, I always wait until the end step to crack this guy so that I don't have to exile it from my graveyard before I get it back with my Ravos. So that is a bit of a downside. I guess if you're in a deck where you just want to pay your life down, it could be good, like that Fateful Hour deck that I made. So it can be usable there. Likely you won't be using that ability. It's just a good utility creature. Next up, Gather Specimens. 3 blue instant. If a creature would enter the battlefield under opponent's control this turn, it enters under your control instead. And this is a card that used to get played in the format all the time because people liked stealing their opponent's commanders with it. It is a lot of mana, but stealing your opponent's commander can sometimes be worth it, right? That's the worst case scenario with this card, is just steal your opponent's best creature. However, there can be a lot of way better options. Against a blink deck, this is particularly good. Say you're playing against a Brago deck, he gets in for damage. He's going to blink all of his creatures. In response, you cast this, and those creatures then come back into play under your control, right? It has nothing to do with casting. It's just if they would enter the battlefield. One of my favorite combos is this in Planar Guide. I activate my Planar Guide, likely on my opponent's end step, so I'd have to pay so much mana. Blink all the creatures in play. Then untap on my turn. They will come back on the following end step, which will be my end step. I will cast Gather Specimens. And then on the end step, all my opponent's creatures enter the battlefield under my control. Pretty neat little combo there to steal everyone's creatures. I would say just 6 mana to gain control of an opponent's creature with this, which this ends up usually being, isn't super great. You can get into some really neat shenanigans with this card, though. It does have a very unique effect. Next up, General's Regalia. 3 mana artifact. Pay 3. The next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, that damage is dealt to target creature you control instead. So of course, this is a great way to just protect yourself. Someone's attacking with their big Voltron commander, it's going to kill you. You can just have one of your creatures take one for the team, and it's going to die instead, right? However, where this card gets really good is in, of course, the situation where you want to be dealing damage to your own creatures. This is an absolute auto-include in a Jared Carthelian deck, in my opinion, because, of course, it not only protects you from losing the monarchy, but it's going to make it so that your Jared gets bigger. Any Enrage deck, right? Those I'm punching my own creatures, the Stuffy Doll deck, any decks like that, which, of course, there's a bunch in the format now. This is a great include because it's a great way to just deal damage to your own creatures. Next up, Genju of the Realms, a card I've mentioned before on this series that I think is just a really easy include into any 5-color deck. It's got to be in a 5-color deck, of course, because it costs Wooburg, white, blue, black, red, and a green. It is a legendary enchantment aura, and if you're in a legendary theme, that could be relevant. It is an enchant land, so you got to cast this on a land, but you just pay 2 mana, and the enchanted land becomes a legendary 8/12 spirit creature with trample until the turn. It's still a land. That seems pretty good, right? I just pay 5 mana, put this on a land, and then at any point during the game, I just pay 2 mana to turn that land into an 8/12. Makes a phenomenal blocker even. You could just use it for that, but also makes a pretty darn good attacker. For only 2 mana, I'm making this giant spirit creature that I can smash people with. Of course, it's going to survive board wipes. I can board wipe on my turn, and then after all the creatures are dead, I pay 2 mana to animate this and attack someone with. If someone board wipes on their turn, I will still have my Genju of the Realm around. But even if someone does manage to kill it while it's animated or destroy the land that is enchanting, that's okay too, because when enchanted land is put into a graveyard, you may return Genju of the Realm from your graveyard to your hand, so you get it back. It also is great for getting those pips. If for some reason you just want more pips in play, this has Wooburg pips on it, right? So that can be relevant as well. For me, this is just a card that I would just love to put in any 5-color deck because I think it's going to be great for you. A card that is good in just about any deck and really sees no play at all is Gideons Avenger. 1 white human soldier 2/2. So it is a human and a soldier, 2 of the most popular creature types in the entire format. And of course, we have lots of tribal decks that are doing those creature types. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Gee, how often in a commander game is an opponent's creature becoming tapped? Like constantly, right? Whether it be creatures that are attacking or someone taps their mana dork, or maybe you're in a tapping theme where you can tap down your opponent's creatures. Obviously, this is an auto include there, but you could throw this in any deck, and this guy's just going to sit there getting enormous. I know it's a vanilla creature, but man, your opponents are going to have to deal with it. It's better in a +1/+1 counter theme. It's better in a deck where you're just giving abilities to your creatures for whatever reason. I mean, heck, even just an equipment deck. Put this in an equipment deck. He's just going to sit there getting huge. And you know what? My commander just died, so I'm going to throw that Sword of Vengeance on my Gideons Avenger. Now it's becoming a serious threat, right? Just throw this in one of your decks. I guarantee you'll be shocked at how quickly this guy gets enormous. I really like Giant Trapdoor Spider. 1 red and a green spider 2/3. The fact that this is a Gruul spider means you can maybe fit it in a Gruul spider tribal deck. People could be doing that already. I think in a Thantis deck, it actually is a good fit because of the ability that it has. Pay 1 green and a red, tap, exile Giant Trapdoor Spider and target creature without flying that's attacking you. This is a way, it's a kind of a pillow fort way a little bit in Gruul colors, which is funny, but also is a way to exile creatures in Gruul colors, which is also significant. It's just such a funny, interesting card. Very unique. If you don't actually know a Trapdoor spider is a real thing, quickly look that up on YouTube. It's a real funny creature that actually does exactly what the name says, which kind of makes this card even more interesting. Just having this sit in play is going to make it so that your opponents won't want to attack you with non-flying creatures. Might be worth giving a whirl. I'm going to end off with Ghost Town. It is just a land that adds colorless. That is all. However, you can pay 0 and return it to owner's hand, activate only if it's not your turn. This is just a land that returns to hand, and for a whole lot of reasons you might be wanting to do that. I have this in a couple of decks, and I will explain why to maybe give you guys some ideas of why you might want to start putting it in your decks. I have it in my Niambi deck because that is essentially a catch-up ramp deck. I have a lot of catch-up ramp in that deck. And of course, having this return to my hand will make it so that I get my land tax trigger on my upkeep, something like that, right? As an example, I also have trade routes in that deck, so I can just return this to hand and then discard it to my trade routes to draw a card, another way to use it. And of course, I also have this in my Brelin deck, which is discarding because it is just discard fodder. Later in the game, right, I just play this guy on like turn 2, tap it for mana for however many turns I'm using it, and then on like turn 8, I'm gonna return it to my hand because then I can use it to discard to Thrill a Possibility or something like that, right? So I really like this in a discard theme because it's just discard fodder later in the game when you're empty-handed and you need to discard something to your Thrill a Possibility or whatever, right? Maybe getting triggers off of stuff as well. It is a very unique land, right? It's returning itself to hand. Maybe you just want a landfall trigger, right? It's worth putting in a landfall deck because I got to get a landfall trigger off of maybe my commander. On my opponent's turn, I return it to my hand so that I'm guaranteed a land drop on my turn, right? There's a lot of reasons to put a card like this in a commander deck. Give it a try. That is it for today. 10 more cards you should be putting in your commander decks. Let me know if you're playing any of these or if you're going to start playing any of these. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.